Welcome to More Tea Vicar with myself, James Stevenson.
Me, Wayne Massey. We've been away for... Well, I've been away.
Welcome back.
Yeah, so it hasn't been a More Tea Vicar for a while.
This week, the title is This Is My Body.
Yes.
So we've got two headlines and one cultural moment that we're working with. So the first one is the death of Ludwig Minnelli, founder of Dignitas.
As opposed to Liza Minnelli, the actress.
So Minnelli was the founder of Dignitas, the movement, I suppose, that has been at the heart of the assisted dying.
Yeah. Dignitas is the Xerox of the assisted dying world. If you follow me, or the Hoover of the assisted dying world. It's the brand that we
associate with. And so he's been a lifelong campaigner for the freedom of choice and self-determination at the end of life. And then and he himself has died, so he has taken his own medicine, as it were, and has his life has ended, and by assisted dying.
Yeah, so it's a bit. I feel. It's a bit like, you know, it feels appropriate that he's done that in a weird way, like a kind of like a Schadenfreude type thing. Not Schadenfreude, it's wrong use of that phrase, but in the same way that the guy who invented the Segway died on a Segway, it feels like a really nice. Did you know that the guy died?
Okay,
but so, it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's reached the news, and it's reached the news at a time when the assisted dying bill is still being debated in Parliament. So this is topical without being at the head of the news.
And we're not going to go into the nature of some of the philosophical stuff behind, you know, self-determination, the right to choose one's own end. We've done that in an awful lot of podcasts. But it, just as a quick kind of reminder, that's the kind of the high point of kind of post-modernity and postmodern philosophical thought, that the most important value is my freedom to determine who I am and therefore how I live. So that was the first one.
Ludwig Minnelli, then Dame Esther Rantzen.
So Dame Esther Rantzen is a big believer in assisted suicide. She has been a massive promoter of it as it's been going through the UK. She has terminal cancer. What has been interesting has been there's a couple of moments where it's almost felt like an alternative narrative she's accidentally brought to the fore around assisted dying. The first was when she discovered that there was a treatment that might be available that would extend her life, and she was really delighted for that, and didn't seem to pick up on that treatment had appeared long after a point where she said, I would have wanted to take my own life. And then recently she said she's very, very seriously ill, so she's talking about bringing Christmas forward because she wants to have Christmas with her family. And again, it hasn't kind of been named, but again, it's that value that what really matters in life is not actually my own self-determination or who I am or I get to choose, but it's who I am and in relation to the people I love. And so she's this value of actually the most important thing I can do is spend time with the people I love and give time to people I love, which is actually, again, something we talked about in a previous podcast. And just it felt that those two things sat kind of slightly jarring. There's the guy who's founded Dignitas, has taken his own life, and then there's a lady who's saying, well, we need to have assisted dying, but actually there's been these couple of times where she's talked in a very different way.
Yeah, which if you haven't watched the film or read the book Me Before You, is part of the tension of that is actually what does my death mean for those I love and those who love me, and how we live our lives. And it's part of a bigger issue. So we're coming at assisted dying today and talking about the theology that sits behind that, but we also know that that's the theology that sits behind the understanding of abortion, where there's a self-determination. So the theme, this is my body, it was, I heard a Roman Catholic theologian saying that essentially what is being said in the context of assisted dying is, this is my body, I can choose what I want to do with it. And the same with abortion, this is my body, I can choose to do what I want with it. And then also within the trans rights issue, there's this is my body, I can choose what I want to do with it. So recently there was a study commissioned for 250 teenagers by, I think it's King's College London, who are going to have puberty blockers, and they're aged between, I think, 10 and 15. And so that's despite the fact that they've been banned. Here's this study that's going to happen. And then alongside that, in the same week, there was a headline that said essentially people can be ejected from toilets on the basis of how they look. So trans women can be ejected from toilets on the basis of how they look. So over here, we can't give puberty blockers, but we can. And over here, you can be ejected from toilets on the basis of how you look. So there's all sorts of complications. And I think the illustration I've got in my head is ethically, this world sounds like, it sounds like a bunch of people in huge, those Zorb balls, where you kind of wander around and you're in a massive ball. This is the kind of the buffered self.
Charles Taylor.
That you're basically the world ethically looks like a bunch of people charging around a field, bumping into each other, and falling over, and then getting up and then running and bumping into each other and falling over. So we have these debates, and we're getting no closer to each other.
It's the big. I'm sorry, I love how we're only a few minutes, and I just have to shout out Charles Taylor's names, and then I'm happy I've got my tick out of the way. But it is the biggest critique that has come to postmodernity, which is this is I've got my truth, and as long as I've got my truth, everything's okay. That actually, once my truth starts crashing into your truth, it doesn't work anymore. Which is why we went from small mini narratives to small midi narratives, but we've already worked out that they don't operate. Which is where Horton comes in with the mega narrative.
So actually, in this conversation, the one that's the least engaged out of those three of abortion, assisted dying, and gender is actually abortion, because we don't speak enough about the unborn child's identity and their role. We will talk about the loss of those grieving in the context of assisted dying, and we will talk about the ethical implications of gender transitioning or gender self-reconstruction. So but we're bringing these three together because there's this sense of actually there's a self-autonomy about the body that comes from a different worldview, and we think that that has it should sound in our ears differently as Christians, because when we hear the phrase "this is my body," we should be thinking of someone else. Who is that, Wayne?
It's going to be Jesus, isn't it? It is. So this is the kind of the Christian counter narrative, which involves all of humanity, but Jesus, as the perfect human who gave himself for us, has a different view of a different understanding of how we view our bodies and our physicality.
Yeah. So the body matters, and that's something that's really important to assert within Christianity. God isn't a God who lives far off in the sky and has no interest really in us, just a kind of a passing glance towards us. The body matters. God created us in his image. We have an understanding that we are not our own. As Christians, we are to honor God with our bodies. That's from 1 Corinthians. And we believe that with Athanasius, that Jesus became what we are, that he might make us what he is. He became human. He was flesh. He was born as a baby. He needed his nappy changed. He was held by his parents. He was loved by his family. He suffered on the cross as a human.
And sticking with Athanasius, the mistake that we've made in being slightly Greek and Gnostic for hundreds of years, thousands of years, is that when we think of salvation, unless we stop and think about it, we think about our souls and we think about eternity on a cloud. And Athanasius had a phrase: "What is not assumed is not healed," meaning that actually Jesus became fully human because our full humanity needed healing, and so actually that our bodies are fallen.
Yeah.
And they require healing, and they require restoration, and they require forgiveness and salvation. And so there's something about like what it is to be an embodied human being is part of what it is to be a fallen human being, and also part of what it will be to be a new human being in the new eternity.
To early church, heresies, mistakes, and understanding of who Jesus is Gnosticism, Docetism both denied the humanity of Jesus in different ways. Docetism in particular was the kind of idea that Jesus was kind of walking around almost like as a ghost. It didn't actually fully assume. So that's Athanasius' correction is to Docetism. 1 John is a book written in a letter written essentially to correct those kind of errors. And so when it begins and it says that which we have seen, which we have heard, which we have touched, just such a beautiful, simple declaration that God has become human, and because he loves us, and he sees that he needs to save us, and he comes in a body, we can see that bodies, that tells us something about human bodies and that they matter. So we're not just soul and mind in a kind of abstract way. We are interconnected. We are whole. We're to love him with all our soul, mind, soul, body, and strength. Mind, soul, strength. Yeah.
I was thinking. No.
Yeah.
I was thinking out loud.
Should we go to
Yeah.
So then that means that when we hear, as we do when we gather around the table, at the communion table, and we hear the words from the scriptures about what Jesus wants us to remember, and how it means for us to be formed as church around the body of Christ given to us in bread, and the blood of Christ given to us in wine. That when we hear the words, "This is my body given for you," we within our tradition understand that not as the actual presence in those elements, but as symbols which by faith we receive him, that lead us to a deeper understanding of what it means for us to be in communion with the one who has given his body on the cross. So when he says, "This is my body," he is pointing not just to a sacrament, but ultimately to the saving work of the cross.
So our friend Ludwig,
Yeah.
he has chosen his own death for his own ends.
Yeah.
Jesus chooses his own death for our ends. So Ludwig gives his life away for himself.
Yes.
Jesus gives his life away for you and for me.
Yes. That is really very good. Do you want to say that again? Because I think it's just...
Ludwig gave his life away for himself. I just think, what would Tim Keller say? Jesus gives his life away for you and for me. And the pattern of how Jesus chose to live bodily is the pattern that humanity is designed to do.
Yeah.
And it's this understanding, like the prayer in the garden, yet not my will, but yours. So Jesus, so that's the bit. So Ludwig is, my will is to do this. Jesus goes, not my will, but yours, to his heavenly Father. That actually, that the cruciform shape of Jesus' life is the shape of a healthy human life, which is that my life is given away, and it's not just my intellect or my soul or it's everything about me is given away for others.
So a correct reading of Genesis helps us to see that outside of Christ, it is logical to come to a conclusion that this is your body.
Yeah.
Because you have no understanding of what it means to be created, what it means to be fallen, and what it means to be redeemed.
Yeah.
But once we have an understanding in Jesus of what it means for us to be created and loved, but also for us to be fallen and therefore needing to be redeemed, and what it therefore means for us to receive love from one who gave himself for us, then we have an understanding of what it means for us to give ourselves, our souls, our bodies as a living sacrifice for Jesus.
And a really small example of that, I heard a lovely thing today from somebody talking about somebody else at B&A, saying that somebody who's big cough. Somebody who's involved in Soul Food, our community meal, and they noticed about this person that when some of the kind of fringe members of our church family arrive and come in, that there is somebody who, he said, you could look across some of the room and you could wave and you could smile. But he said, I've noticed there's somebody from Soul Food who will always go and sit with them and sit next to them. That's a physical act.
Yeah.
And that's person choosing to do something bodily that communicates love more in a way that kind of like a look across the room and a smile and a heart shake with your hands. And so that's just a very small picture of what healthy human living looks like, is to use my whole being for someone else.
So we're bodies, and those bodies are saved by somebody who has come in a body and says, "This is my body," and from that we then receive a different identity and an understanding of who we are. So we're knitted together in our mother's womb.
So, and keep going, because I'm going to ask you some questions.
We become children of God. And that children are humans, so we have an identity, not born by natural descent or of a husband's will, but born of God. So God's Spirit comes to live in our bodies. We don't have like a download on the cloud of the Holy Spirit for us as disciples. It's not something that we connect with. We believe that the Holy Spirit comes to us and fills us in our bodies. And so our identity is something that we receive from God in ourselves. It's not something that we decide and self-determine.
And here's the interesting angle to talk to all of your friends. that is everybody's identity. So James,
Yeah.
you and Jacob bought Danish football jerseys the last World
we
Cup.
did, yeah.
Why did you buy Danish football jerseys?
Because we've got Danish ancestry,
Okay.
and because we decided that the stand that the Danes were taking against the World Cup hosts was not ethically correct.
But there was like.
And the Danish shirt stood up to that. Yeah. Sorry.
No. The point I'm making here, though, is, I mean, I could have bought a Danish shirt and I could have said all that, but it would have carried less resonance because I don't have Danish ancestry.
Yeah.
So there's part of your identity.
Yeah.
Did you and Jacob choose your Danish identity?
No.
Okay. Number one. Number two. You quite like classical music, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you just wake up one day when you're 6 years old and go, I'm going to like classical music? No. How did that happen?
Because there was classical music going on in my house.
Okay, so so was that something was that an identity you've received or that you chose?
It was something I received.
Yeah. I could go on, couldn't I?
Yeah. There's so much.
So it was interesting. I was talking to somebody yesterday who said, "Oh, isn't it amazing how we don't have to be Christians and we can all have the same values?" And actually, the question I should have asked is, where did you get those values from? Because they didn't just drop into your head.
Yeah.
And so actually, everybody we talk to in our world, their identity is actually received, very rarely self-constructed. And interestingly enough, the ones... So I was having a conversation recently with somebody who was running through issues of sexuality for themselves, and then they started to unpack and started telling me stuff about their teenage years, and you're like going, oh my word, we are downstream of a whole load of things that were said to you and that happened in your life between the age of about 8 and 15. And so now a lot of who you are now comes out of that.
Yeah.
I remember talking to somebody who said, I can't handle conflict because in my childhood growing up, when conflict came into the house, as it did all the time, I would just shut down.
Yeah.
So now I don't do conflict.
Yeah.
And I choose not to do conflict. Do you? You know what I mean? I was talking to another friend of mine who...
you do it, you just avoid it.
Well, yeah. So never believe anybody who tells you they're good at conflict, because I don't think anybody is. We just all have our strategy for it. But it's this bit, how we do most of who we are has been taught to us or has been imputed to us, and we have received.
So we receive the identity of being children of God, and we know that then has an impact on our bodies. It's not something that's out there. But then we live with this reality that in this life there is suffering and there is evil, and then ultimately there is death. And death for the Christian is both... It is an enemy, but it is an enemy that has been defeated. So we know that death is an outworking of sin. We know that from the garden. And we know that the last enemy to be destroyed is death. And we know that where death is thy sting, where a grave is thy victory. Christian hope means that we don't have to face death in the same way that other people face death. So you'll notice in contemporary culture, people will find it really difficult to say the word died or death. They'll say past or gone.
Or they're afraid to say what someone died of. So there was a guy who wrote the song that the Bristol Rovers play whenever they lose, which is quite a lot at the moment, died recently, and it said after a period of ill health. Yeah. Whereas actually, I think sometimes Christians can be those of us who were better saying after dying of and naming it.
Yeah. And so we have this living hope in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead that means that we will be given a body that is immortal, incorruptible, and it will bear some resemblance to the body that we have in this life. We understand from the resurrection of Jesus.
Will you be bald? Will I be receding?
I don't know. How old will we be? How will we relate to one another? All of these questions we're left with.
I want the wisdom of my 40s and the ability of my thank you,
early
Lord.
20s.
Yes. Some of us went on a little longer, James. Resurrection. Can I just say something about that? Because actually, this resurrection frames everything. Therefore, we're middle-aged men, so we are coming. Very much, some of us are definitely coming into the point where we realise our bodies don't either do what they used to do to the extent they could, or B, actually have kind of problems. And what's interesting is for the non-Christian, that discovery that you're no longer able to do what you used to do, or that actually that you might have an illness or you might have something wrong with you. If there is a cliff edge coming, which is the end, that's actually quite scary. And so if you're Ludwig and there's actually my body, I'm struggling to live now. I've got this illness, or I'm just a 92-year-old man and I'm tired. Because there's a cliff edge coming, you're like, well, why carry on? Whereas with the Christian, it's actually, there isn't a cliff edge coming, there's a door to something new. And interestingly enough, between now and that door, as hard as life might get, God has a purpose for me. And
Yes.
that's
So I almost want to scrap what we've got in our notes and go in the three areas that we've identified.
oh yes, go on.
How does this work its way out? So in the first, I have a friend whose father died of motor neurone disease. Devout Christian man.
Yep.
And at no point would he, had he died with the opportunity of going to Dignitas, would he have chosen that? Because he understood that the suffering he was going to go through, which was going to be deeply troubling and painful, was a way in which he was going to grow in his knowledge and understanding of who Jesus was and his death. So he saw his suffering and his impending asphyxiation as part of what it meant for him to grow into Christ likeness, and therefore the rest of the family understood that this is what was going on. But that was a complete anathema to those who were not in Christ and couldn't understand what it would mean for someone to say, I choose to accept the path that I have in this broken body and accept that I'm going to become more like Jesus in my character as I go through this brokenness in my body.
And it's worth naming, because I know of other stories in the same situation where that decision's been taken, sometimes by non-Christians, sometimes by Christians, but where around them some Christians have gone, these are the moments where I can see why culture is up for a sister dying, because I've watched somebody really suffer.
Yeah.
And one of the best things about being a human being is it's a very rare human being who enjoys the suffering of others, and especially those who they love.
Yeah.
And so that's when we talk about a sister dying, we need to name that actually our hearts go out to those who suffer.
Yeah.
And actually, if you sit here and go, I don't understand why anybody would choose it, you're probably not. I do understand why people would choose it. And what happens is it's only as you then gently begin to unpick it and you start to talk about the people around somebody, or you talk about the experience that it has on family and on loved ones and on friends. And when you talk about alternative experiences where someone sees that life is worth living towards the end, that you begin to unpick it. So it's almost like we need to kind of ease our way into these conversations and go, yeah, I can understand why culture would want this.
Yeah.
Not just philosophically, but on a heart level.
Yeah.
But also let's just begin to just pull gently at this and go, well,
yeah.
Because actually Esther Ransom wants to have her last Christmas.
Yeah.
And I knew a retired missionary who had MND. He gave me a load of theology books when I far too. One of them's totally in Greek, so I've never read it. I've kept it. But he used to sit in the chair in the corner of the room. They used to have Sunday lunch, this missionary couple, and people come from church every Sunday, and he would sit in the corner of the room and, on one level wouldn't engage, but actually he was taking it all in.
Yeah.
And apparently he loved those lunches and he loved people coming around the house. Yeah. And so there's this element of where we just need to gently unpick. I get why we might see the reason for this, but can we begin to tell a better story?
Better story.
So that's that one.
And then if we were to look at transgender ideology, I think what we've got to acknowledge is that underneath the debate is the very clinical reality of gender dysphoria, where people have an understanding of gender in their body that is complicated, and they genuinely clinically feel like they need to be a different gender to the one that they were born. And we know that in different societal constructs to the one that we're in at the moment, that has been a real part of human life, and that gender is affected by the fall. And we know that Jesus acknowledges that when he talks about marriage and sexuality in Matthew. But alongside that, we have to acknowledge that there are societal constructs around sex and gender that make life really complicated for children, teenagers, and young adults in our society. And so what we would want to do is we want to bring and approach this that seeks to help people to understand that that gender isn't formed just by, we don't want to come and say it's it's a biological issue. We want to say that actually forming your gender in relation to attraction or in relation to rejection or pain isn't how we form our gender. Actually, what we're looking for is we're looking for an understanding of our humanity that comes from the cross, and for the one who gave his body up for us.
If you've got a long time, about 45 minutes, go find the talk from David Bennett from earlier this year at B&A, where he talks about sexuality being transformed by the cross.
Yeah. So we would be wanting to encourage people to discover the one who gave his body for us that we might have life, and that in discovering him, you might come to a healed, transformed experience of what you have at the moment, and that may we don't want to be determinative in terms of what that will result in for people, but we do know that people need Jesus, and that he can bring healing to people's experience, and then finally abortion. And I think this is a really tricky one because people will often feel a sense of condemnation around this topic. It may be that people have had an abortion out of desperation, and then shame comes around that, and deep regret, and it's difficult to bring that out, particularly in churches where people feel like they need to conform or that they'll be condemned. It's really important to remember that actually the person who wrote the Ten Commandments, from which some of this theology comes, was himself guilty of murder.
Yeah.
So when we set it in that light, we can know that actually that the redemptive work of the cross is something that must speak into any situation like this. And what we want to say is that whilst, yes, so for anyone contemplating abortion right now, we would want to say that actually what Jesus has a plan for your body, and his plan is to bring goodness and life into it, and his plan isn't to bring death into it. And so however scary the world might look right now and the future might look for you, God's goodness is even better.
Yeah. And it's the thing that I think, the thing behind the thing is this idea that when Paul, he turns up in Athens and says, to the unknown God in whom we live, move, and have our very being, that in the West, that we have forgotten that there is a God of love within whom we live and move and have our very being, and that God has bestowed us with dignity and with honor, that he has, yes, we're fallen, but he has made you and me with our, and there are elements of our character that need reformation and need healing, but we're not come. I've always thought the illustration in my head at the moment about salvation is we're like houses. This is C.S. Lewis's illustration. And some of us look a little bit better than others. Some of us are complete doer-uppers when we come to faith in Jesus, and some of us need a new kitchen, a new bathroom, and we need new and rewiring, and maybe a new roof. We all need new foundations. There's the gospel. But we all need underpinning. But actually, that he doesn't. No matter how much of a mess, just thinking about somebody recently around church family who died, no matter how much of a mess your life looks like to the outside world, when you step into faith in Jesus, he doesn't bulldoze you. Yeah. And he basically carefully puts you back together and restores you. And so it's not like a grand design where we've bought this house and we're going to flatten the plot and build a new thing. Actually, we're going to restore what's here, and we're going to restore it to how I intended it. And that is what he's doing in all of our hearts. But in order to allow him to do that, it starts with us going, "Oh, I am not my own. Somebody made me. Somebody designed me. And somebody knows what I should look like. And deep down inside, I think I know at my best what I should look like. And he wants that's what he wants for all of us."
And so for us to be able to speak into a world that has this, going back to the initial illustration of the Zorb balls, people kind of crashing into each other, and particularly around this issue of what it means for people to say, well, this is my body, this is what I can do with it, in order for us to be able to speak into that conversation and to be able to bring people close safely so that they can put their Zoll balls down and actually discover what it means for them to be made in the image of God and loved by Him.
Yeah.
We ourselves need to understand what it means for us to be able to say, well, this is not my body. It's been given to me to steward. I am known, I am loved, but actually how I live in my body is ultimately defined, determined, and purposed by the one who said, this is my body given for you.
Yep.